Welcome to Ghosts and Grit. My guest on this episode is Dr. Drew Pinsky. Dr. Drew and I go back many, many, many years. It's got to be pushing 25 years I've known him. He has been a friend and was my doctor for a period of time. He was instrumental in helping me get sober. We touch on that. We touch on some paranormal. We touch on some COVID. We touch on the homeless crisis in LA. It's a really awesome podcast. I hope you enjoy. Dr. Drew Pinsky.
Yes, sir.
You are my very first guest on the Ghosts and Grits podcast.
I am so privileged. I am so excited. Now, here's what I was holding back on saying before the mics heated up here. I should be the very last person you have on this show. And yet I'm going to explain to you why I'm the exact right person for this show.
Okay.
You ready?
All right, fire away.
All right. First of all, both my wife and I are huge Jack fans, huge Jack and Ozzy fans in particular.
Appreciate that.
And she watches religiously the show, I forget what it's called.
Will Detour, the one with my dad?
No. The one with both your parents where you're showing them extreme.
Okay. Want to believe.
You want to believe. Want to believe. And she is a big, she's into it. I'm more like your dad a little bit. Mm-hmm. I'm a skeptic, right? And it's hard to convince me of things. But my wife is totally into psychics. All her friends are psychics.
That's right. You guys are friends with Cindy Kaza, right?
We are very good friends with Cindy Kaza and a lot of that whole world. And so I've seen what they do, and I've I am open to figuring things out. I know that this little instrument I have here that I think I'm using to conscious sort of, with conscious intent, I know it's a limited instrument, and I know there's a lot going on that my little thing in my skull doesn't do. And I've watched what the psychics do, and they're doing something.
And that's the thing. It's
something.
It is. And is it like some people are just more perceptive at reading body language? It's people that can do hypnosis or power of suggestion or whatever.
Yep.
There's something to it.
Yes.
And I've never been able to figure it out.
Well, if Tyler Henry, isn't that the Hollywood?
Yes.
So I wired him up with a EEG thing. This neuroscientist wired him up while he was reading Steve-O, who was massively skeptical. And of course, he nailed him. Mm-hmm. And he was like stunned. Steve-O couldn't believe it. And what the neuroscientist and I were looking at, and he'd never seen an EEG that looked like that before. He was at once hyper vigilantly awake and asleep. He had sleep waves and vigilant things going on in the temporal lobes. He was like, wild. I cannot explain this. And if you know Tyler, he sweats like a maniac, and he does a releasing sign too. You get rid of your frontal lobes that are not in the way. He does this kind of repetitive writing thing it's a releasing behavior. And so he sweats like crazy, meaning that the autonomic nervous system is also involved, and his heart rate goes way down when he's into it. And it fits with what I see Cindy and her type doing.
Yeah.
They're tuning into something. They're going to a different state that I'm used to, and they have abnormal eye movements, like non-biological eye movements. I've noticed, like rotatory nystagmus and back and forth, and they're often looking off to the right. And it's sort of something is going on.
Yeah.
Something's going on.
Now, when you're going through med school, does it ever come up?
Never. Zero. We got other stuff to worry about.
but like ghosts, paranormal, the soul, anything like that?
The soul. It comes up, we deal, particularly in my field, internal medicine, you deal a lot with death and dying.
Yeah.
And you end up getting very comfortable and familiar with alive and then dead. Mm-hmm. It's a thing. I've been there when people do that many, many, many times. And whenever you've seen that a lot, you have some sort of extraordinary experiences with it.
Yeah. Is it, can you now comparing it to like a dog, I've had, you've had to put a dog down and you feel the dog kind of expiring, and you can tell like, oh, that's no longer can you feel that in the room? Precisely.
The dog part is weird though, and it's actually why I'm sort of against euthanasia, because I'm not against people having the right to do that kind of thing, but I'm just sort of against it because of my experience putting dogs down. Choosing a time to do that is so profound to me.
Yeah.
It's like I'm choosing the time when this dog leaves his I can't.
Yeah.
It's hard to do, even though I know you have to because dogs suffer at the end. It's still a profound thing to me.
It is funny because I have like a similar, like, I guess it's just like a mind warp about the timing. It's like I remember reading this article about a woman in Oregon who had this whole like plan leading up to her. She was gonna, euthanize herself, and she got the medication, and it was this whole thing. And I'm like,
How do you just go, okay,
this is the moment.
Tuesday at 3:00?
Yeah, how do you do that? I couldn't do. And by the way, for this last dog, well, I guess the only dog I've ever done this with, I delayed it a weekend because it just didn't feel like we weren't quite there.
Yeah.
And then when Monday rolled around, I was like, oh yeah, we have to do something. She's suffering.
Yeah.
And so it's easier when somebody's suffering, but still, it was still weird. They're doing that for a human. And again, having been there, I've actually been in situations where like pressors, medication, or keeping somebody alive, and I was like an intern. The cardiologist called me, goes, go turn these pressors off. She's going to die, but I need you to turn the pressors off. And I was like, okay, so turn them off. And she started dying. I was like, I put it back up again. I was like, I was a young intern, and she came back, and I thought, oh, this is like ridiculous. I don't know what to do here. So they're like, shut it off. I went, okay.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So it's
It's a moment. You get very familiar with it.
Can you now, as a doctor, can you walk into a room and look at someone and be like, oh, that's like, death is in the corner.
That's going. And as an internist, you start to get comfortable with it, and you start to learn about dignity. You start to learn about it being, the process that people go through should be as much a part of their life as they're living.
Yeah.
You should do it with full dignity and respect and on their terms, and not make people suffer. And and with loved ones, there's so many good ways to do it.
Yeah.
So one time I'm just flashing on something where I had this woman who was a friend, and it was time, and family was in there and everything, and I came outside the family, like, I think this is about it, and I started crying, and I said, look, I'm just so concerned. She's such a dignified woman that this dignity be maintained all the way to the end. Of the family was like, got it, done. So
wow. That's
I have chills when I think about it.
For sure.
It's profound.
You've probably had patients for years and years and years, and it's like you have a relationship with them.
100%. Look, this woman, this thing I'm telling you about is a great example. That she was I would call her a dear friend.
Yeah.
But it was time. And my greatest fear was that somebody would deal with her in an undignified fashion here when there was nothing really to be done. And we do that a lot in this country. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I don't know if they do it in England, but they do it here.
It seems like there's a great deal of like towards the end, like frustration where they're just like, people just stop. They're just like, oh, I'm over having to deal with this. It is strange.
But anyway, so I'm open to all kinds of things.
Cool.
I do believe the instrument in our skull is limited. I think our notions of time and temporality are probably screwed up, and so there might be something there going on also. So,
have you ever had an experience that you were like, wait, I can't really explain that? As far as the paranormal
times. I wouldn't call it paranormal. I didn't think of it as paranormal, but in terms of experience something that somebody else is having.
Yeah.
Anybody that's been in deep therapy with somebody will have those experiences.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you hear music, or you have smells, or something hurts in a part of your body. And I got very good at sort of bringing that into the room and going, I'm having an experience. And sometimes people don't react well to that because it's intense.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's something real. It's something dramatic that they've left behind a long time ago. And it's their brain and body saying, I want to communicate to you.
Yeah.
And you'll get it if you tune into it.
Yeah.
My favorite one is how a guy kept hearing the opening sequence of Mad Men when he'd walk in.
Really?
Da-na-da-na. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, and then it went on, and then I started feeling like I was the character falling through the buildings. It was like, whoa, what's this? And I didn't say anything because I'm like, well, this is not me. This is something happening to me because of this person who was describing horrible trauma. Horrible.
Do you think his emotional state was kind of imprinting it on you, or
our brains are set up in such a way that trauma gets walled off, but it still wants attention. It still tries to communicate, and it does it in these very, very deep emotional. You have to be kind of tuned to it. You have to hear it and understand what's you. If I hadn't had a ton of training, I wouldn't even noticed it. Wow. You have to kind of really tune. It's like you're listening with your whole body, and to conclude this, it's my favorite story because it was so profound. One day he came in, started telling me these horrible things, and then I was falling through the buildings like I felt every time, and then all of a sudden I turned into a baby falling through the buildings, and I was like, I couldn't take it. It was like literally I'm like, and I said, I'm sorry, I'm having an experience. I'm going to have to bring it into the room here, and he got furious and stormed out.
Wow, interesting. Did he think that you were trying to like hog the?
Came back the next day and went, how did you know? Because all I hear is the baby's crying, the baby's hurt, the baby. And I thought,
wow, Drew, you might be some kind of empath.
Some kind.
It's there.
And so because when you have those experiences, it opens you to whatever it is that people like Cindy Kays are doing.
Yeah, yeah. And it's, it's funny. It's like the more that I've done this, and I talk about this a lot, I don't think it's what we think it is. I think
that's right.
Like,
I think that's a great way to think about it.
Yeah, we owe, like, historically speaking, right? When people were like, "Oh, there's a drought. Oh, we've pissed off the gods."
Yes.
And so people would, we kind of put a human
anthropomorphic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
and I think it's, for me, in my experiences, I think it's numerous things. I don't think it's any one thing. And
fits for me.
And so it's funny, like I just did this paranormal convention, and there's like these diehard like ghost believers there, and when you share that, they almost get frustrated, and I'm like, well, no, like it's actually kind of cool that we don't know what we don't know, for one.
Yeah.
And what we're playing with here, like, science can't really quantify. And they probably never will, because there's not an abundance of money to be made from it.
Right.
Like, the moment that someone goes, wait a minute, you can be a billionaire once we figure out ghosts.
Done.
There's going to be government funding, Raytheon and like Northrop Grumman are going to be like running the whole thing.
But to your point about being sort of not needing it to be a cartoon or a fairy tale or a narrative or anything, I love the way you serve stuff up to your parents. Like, what do you think? What you got there? What do you guys think? I don't have an opinion. Well, maybe I do. But
what is your opinion?
What do you guys think?
You know what's kind of funny? I was thinking about this. So obviously you and I go back many, many years. I just celebrated 20 years of sobriety.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. And it's you were there from day one.
Can I know I've said this to you before, but can I talk about it a little bit?
100%. Yeah, go for it.
You were the best adolescent patient I ever had.
Oh, wow.
By far.
Wow.
I never had you came in, you had a pretty significant thing here, and I was like, oh boy. And I said, you literally came in and said, what do I need to do? And I went, well, here's what you need to do. And you fucking did it. I couldn't believe it. Mostly, if I get 10%, I'm happy. You just did everything, and you just kept doing it. That was mind-blowing to me. So congratulations.
Thank
There's
you.
something special about you.
Thank you
and
very much.
especially you as a 17-year-old. That
Yeah.
was just mind-blowing to me.
Yeah.
But that's what it takes to, you just do what you do and keep following direction. And
yeah, just kind of put, well, that's, I don't, listen, for me, I didn't do anything that I that thousands of people haven't done, in front of me.
At your age, it happens. It doesn't like it never happened, but it's extraordinary when it does.
Yeah.
Because adolescents don't want to follow directions. They don't want to do
Oh, no, absolutely not. It's instinctual to rebel. And so when
Right.
someone's like, hey, follow this guideline and you'll be good, and it's like the first thing a teenager wants to do is be like, fuck your guideline.
100%. And you did not do, maybe you felt it, but you didn't do that. You just said, okay, I'll do it.
I just was.
You were done.
Yeah, I was done.
Yeah.
I wasn't thirsty anymore.
Yeah.
And it's
Oh my
weird.
God, I get the chills about that too.
Oh.
So we have a whole interesting history.
Yeah, it is crazy. Like it was funny, like, because it was it's April 21st is when my 20 years was, and I just remember waking up being like, holy shit! Like I can remember getting sober, and it was funny. I'm kind of going all over the place because I'm remembering. So I getting sober at Los Encinas.
Yeah.
You're talking about hearing music. For some reason, when I was in Los Encinas, all that kept playing in my head, I just kept singing it every single day, was Blinded by the Light, the song. It just kept, it was in my head all day long. I'd wake up singing it. I'd go to bed singing it in my head, and I don't know why. And I've never been a particular...
Figure that out. Maybe you'll figure ghosts out too.
I don't know.
Because that's the territory, I think, of what you're talking about in this show. It's sort of the territory of it, right?
Yeah.
Which is the sort of ineffable, uncanny, not digital, sort of tuning into something, and it's almost your body speking to you, right? And your body is this
which is meat popsicle
blob with these autonomic things going on that we don't. We have these giant nervous knots in our neck, our chest, our abdomen, our pelvis. We don't know what they do.
Yeah.
We don't know how they process things, and I believe they're both processing, creating, and communicating.
Yeah,
humbly.
Yeah, it's but when you get into the kind of the spirituality of recovery, it says in a lot of literature, alcoholics and addicts are some of the most spiritual people ever.
Oh yeah.
It's
something about the condition opens you to it.
Yeah.
Or closes you to it, and then you die.
Yeah.
But getting better opens people like nothing I've ever seen. And I'm dilettante at best when it comes to spirituality. It's sort of the here we are, it's the non-medical, non-scientific part of it. But boy, have I seen the magic it does.
Yeah, like whether it's all just something we need just to kind of get through the however many years we have on here, or, some people need it, some people don't. But
what even is it? I'm not even sure I know.
Yeah.
I know I experience it in interpersonal context. So I told you the story about the music and that kind of stuff. That to me is very spiritual. So it's something about this thing we call a relationship. There's you, there's me, and there's something we're creating together. That for me is deeply meaningful, deeply spiritual.
Yeah. It's weird, man. It's just, and then there's these certain kind of things which are, I find are kind of divinely inspired, and you're like, well, where did that come from? I mean, 12-step recovery.
It's find it by the light. Blinded by the light. I mean, that in itself is.
Yeah.
Did it morph into anything else as you moved along?
No, it just kind of it wasn't until I went into the other treatment center that it kind of stopped, and I think because at that point it was like, all right, I'm starting to get into my routine and start to learn things, and but yeah, for those 10 days I was there, it was just constantly in my head. Couldn't stop singing it. It was it was quite an experience. Changing gears a bit.
Yes.
So you've worked in recovery for
a minute,
a long time.
Long time.
You've seen every kind of phase, every fad, every ups and downs.
Yes, I have. That's right. Most people don't appreciate that, but yes, I have.
And it's
you've probably seen some stuff too now.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I got to say, right now, it's the scariest time I have hands down ever seen. It is terrifying.
Agreed.
I go into meetings and it's like, oh, we lost this guy today, or that guy lost. It's every other week I hear something.
Yeah. For multiple reasons. There are multiple reasons for it. The easy one is fentanyl's in everything, and that's an extremely dangerous drug. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Right? And it's finding its way into everything. And that part, by the way, people are just learning is happening. They know that drug addicts die of fentanyl, but somebody just messing around with something can die of fentanyl now too. And that slope is strongly positive right now.
Yeah.
So there's that. There's the fact that recovery has been under attack for the last 15 years or so, which has been odd, weird. Finally, we have a Cochrane analysis that shows conclusively that 12-step is as beneficial in terms of outcome. It's an evidence-based treatment that has as better outcome if abstinence is your goal than professionally managed therapies.
Interesting.
Right. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't get professionally managed therapy. Sometimes you also need that. But to leave out something that's free and available all the time, it's a huge, huge mistake.
Yeah.
But, okay. So there's recovery is under assault. Then there is the prescribing practices of my peers, which is heartbreaking. During the 90s and early 2000s, they killed hundreds of my patients. That was during the opiate thing when we would get people off the opiates and they just put them back on and be dead soon after that.
Yeah.
Now it's a whole mishmash of things. A lot of benzodiazepines, a lot of overprescribing of Suboxone.
Yes, I mean, Suboxone is like...
And I'm a fan of Suboxone, but it's got to be done very judiciously, very cautious.
Absolutely.
Like every medicine, they're all dangerous.
There's got to be a plan with it.
Yes. And somebody's got to understand. Most of my peers don't understand recovery anymore.
Yeah.
Because that's been under attack, and people are calling themselves addiction specialists with no experience. I had an infectious disease doctor the other day tell me that there was no such thing as recovery from opiate addiction. Didn't exist.
Okay.
And I commonly have them say it's too dangerous because you lose your tolerance and you might go back and take something or get exposed to fentanyl.
Yeah.
And I get that. It is dangerous and we got to plan for that. Got to be, but to say it doesn't exist, think about that. And prescribing Suboxone hand over fist,
Yeah. I mean, do you think where are you at with as far as the lessening of consequences for addicts? Like, where are you at with that?
I know what you mean. Maybe you ought to specify.
Okay,
because I know what you mean.
So it seems like there is a culture throughout the country now where punishment for if you when I was younger you got arrested with heroin, you're going to jail.
Right.
Now it's like, see you later, see you tomorrow.
So not only are there no legal consequences, okay, which we can talk about whether there should be or not. I don't want drug addicts in prison. I do not want that. But having legal consequences helps me leverage people into treatment and doing the right thing and stuff like that. So it saved lives. A lot of people, you usually find sobriety when you have sufficient loss. Loss of your children, loss of your health, loss of your freedom, loss of your marriage. Those are the things that people lose, the loss of your job that gets them to come into treatment. But we've taken loss of freedom off the table. All right. But now we're at the point where we're not allowed to ask drug addicts to do anything. We're not allowed to tell them not to shit on the street.
Yeah.
We're not allowed to ask them to do anything.
Yeah.
And if you don't ask a drug addict, hey, come on, let's go, get it together, they'll just keep using until they die. Yeah. That's it. They die.
Yeah, I saw
that's murder, in my opinion. That's a kind of passive.
100%.
Yeah.
Do you think that's deliberate, or you think people just don't know? People that are somehow getting these jobs, getting elected, just have no clue.
They have a ideology and they have no clue. And I fought with them. They fight. And it's the same thing with serious mental illness, like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. I've gone up to Sacramento with families like, hey, I've got a doctor. I've got a bed for my loved one. I've got resources. He just won't. I need to be able to bring him in. You got to help me bring him home. Get out of here. Scram. He's living his best life. Who are you to say what he should be doing? There's literally this, who are you to say? That's the general, and we have privileged something called anosognosia, which you sort of more commonly call denial. We have privileged denial in the law. So if I am demented and I'm walking around the street talking to myself and seem confused, and that demented person is not taken by the hand and brought into treatment, I am guilty of patient abuse if I did not intervene. If I have a schizophrenic with the exact same symptoms, I'm not allowed to go near them. Not allowed to go near them. Not allowed to ask them to do anything. And the horrible irony is dementias don't get better. They get worse no matter what. Yeah. While the schizophrenia, if you let it go unchecked, it will end up in a dementia-like syndrome, and you can bring them back fully. You can bring them back to a functioning life. Not allowed to get near them. Because who are you to say? Who are you to say? It's weird, right? It's so bizarre. It's fundamentally a belief that the brains don't get sick. Yeah. That's the fundamental belief. And that addiction is a choice. It's your choice to keep doing this.
But it's weird because it seems like as a society now we're elevating, we're cherry picking what mental health issues we want to. Oh, yes. It's like if you've got trauma, you're at the top of the pile. Yes. We'll listen to you. We'll do whatever.
Yes.
But if you're a paranoid schizophrenic who's got a meth habit living on the street,
have at it. Enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
We will not get near you. We will not touch you. We will not help you.
Yeah.
And there are ways to help people without sending them to prison.
Yeah.
And all you got to do is, hey, come with me. You can't stay here. Come with me. It's really about all it boils up down to.
Yeah.
But you're going to need the restoration. So the ability to hold people against their will is down to nothing now, right?
Yeah.
There's almost no way to hold people in this country, in this state anyway. You need the restoration of gravely disabled. There is such a thing as gravely disabled, and you need to be able to help gravely disabled people.
Is that along the lines of like a 5150?
Yeah, that'd be one way of it. There's many ways it could be diced. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The guy that wrote the Lanterman and Petra Short Act, which is the 5150 Act, went to his grave believing he'd done something very wrong.
Oh, interesting.
And we made it way worse.
That never gets brought up in.
There's a whole. This whole history how this happened.
Sure, let's do it. I think this is fascinating.
So essentially, the post-structuralist and Michel Foucault took the position that there's no such thing as mental illness. Institutions cause mental illness. This became a very popular idea in the 60s. Then Ken Kesey writes a book that becomes One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest movie. And the American public believes they're looking at a documentary. I reviewed it recently, and it's completely fictionalized. It has nothing to do with reality. But they thought, that's what goes on in a psychiatric hospital. So you have Ken Kesey, you have the post-structuralist, and then you have the psychoanalyst. Psychoanalysis had a grip on American psychiatry for the middle of the 20th century. I mean, a grip, and it did tremendous harm. They forgot they were doctors. They became philosophers. They decided they knew what was right for humanity, and they were going to re-engineer all society. Horrible.
Sounds like
grandiose, horrible dudes.
Sounds very similar to what's going on today.
Well, from a very different perspective, but yes, very similar to some of that stuff. And in the late 40s, early 50s, a guy became sort of a leader in Washington. I think his name was Brown, and he got hands on a promising senator named Kennedy, who he started massaging. His sister Rosemary had serious mental illness and had had a frontal lobotomy. And it was a terrible disaster. And by the way, I saw lots of those cases, because when I was at Los Encinas, a lot of the older patients that were still there had those kinds of procedures
No
done.
way.
A lot of them.
Wow.
And they all became my patients because they were neurological disasters. And so I was the internist around there. So anyway, this guy gets a hold of Kennedy, convinces him that state hospitals are terrible, that they're causing mental illness, and that we're going to solve the world's problems. He and the two subsequent head of what became the National Institute of Mental Health. This first guy was Brown, Yoles, and I forget the other guy's name. And they established National Mental Health. Very good thing. But they decided that because mental illness didn't really exist, that it was a social problem, sound familiar, and we should be able to prevent it. So they convinced, the last signature that President Kennedy put down on paper was the Community Mental Health Act before we went to Dallas, that fateful trip. And the Community Mental Health Act was designed to set all the state healthcare systems on the road to extinction and build outpatient community mental health centers. Okay?
Wow.
No concern for where the patients went. The goal was you let them out of the hospital, they'd be fine.
Yeah.
Because the hospitals are causing the problem. Get them out of there. And we'll just prevent mental illness in the community, something we really don't know how to do to this day, of course.
Yeah.
And you can't. It's very genetic and a lot of things get involved with it. And I like the disbelief on your face. Like, yeah, geez,
This is like the worst idea ever.
Ever. And it became the law of the land. State has 150 years of development of state health care was completely dismantled in a very short period of time. Community mental health centers rose up everywhere, totally useless, complete failure, and then Reagan closed those.
Wow.
So now you have hundreds of thousands of people pouring out of the state hospitals into the streets, the nursing homes, and the prisons. And we have done nothing since the 70s to change this.
Yeah.
It's really the 80s when it all came down, when it all started really becoming ridiculous.
Yeah,
because that was the closure of all the state. It wasn't Reagan actually closed the state systems. He closed the Community Mental Health Act. The whole folklore is Reagan closed the hospitals.
Yeah.
No, they were already set on the road to extinction by President Kennedy.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. I know, because I grew up my whole life being like, oh, this is all because of Reagan. He kicked everyone out of the hospitals.
No, it already was happening, and
Wow.
And then they really became run down because they were choked for their resources. They were just completely choked, and they were just terrible at that point. Doctors didn't want to work there; they were awful.
Yeah, and they were just overcrowded, and just
ridiculous.
conditions were just.
And some of them were that way at the beginning. To be fair, so as opposed to improving the state healthcare system, they just did away with all of it.
Yeah,
and we've only continued to roll it back since then, right? Including the stuff we were talking about earlier with the lack of ability to just ask people with mental illness to kind of come with you and get some help. Let's go do this.
It's funny. Like I've often sat around, you drive around LA, you just see these encampments, and you're like, what's the solution? Like, where?
It's easy.
What do you think it is?
We need more psychiatrists. We need more residential treatment centers. We need a bunch of beds that will step people down. Beds that you can put people in and go, you can't stay here. You can't stay here. Come with me. I got a place for you. I don't know. You want to go to the state? Fine. I wouldn't advise it. Come with me. Just come with me. And come in. Have to follow directions, have to, how it goes, just like you've heard, and then have step down treatments from residential all the way down into outpatient, sober living, vocational rehab. You could restore most of these people. You could.
Do you think? But where does the funding for that come from? Do you think it's private or state?
No, we already spend billions and billions and billions sustaining the current thing.
Yeah,
and building $700,000 units for people that don't want to go in them because they're too ill.
Yeah.
And so let's spend it on treatment. It's the same. I guarantee you. Well, I feel strongly that for the same dollar spent sustaining the status quo, you could treat these people.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, without a doubt. I mean,
the money's there.
The old sheriff, what did he call it? The homeless industrial complex.
It is a homeless industrial complex. It is.
Yeah. And and I look at it like, you look at a lot of these nonprofits now that have started, we're here to fix the homeless. Well, if you fix the homeless, you're out of a job.
Yep.
Where's the incentive for these companies or these organizations, these nonprofits?
For anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you've got to be focused on treatment. And what I love even more is no physician, no doctors anywhere. No psychiatrists, nobody. It's like you're running an open air hospital with no doctors and no nurses. So of course they don't know how to deal with it. And of course they don't understand what's going on. They can't even do the assessment.
Yeah. Do you think that we're to a point where we can come back from this, or do you think
I think it'd be relatively easy. I really do.
How
Maybe
come
I'm naive.
has anyone approached you to
No, because they will not let go of this. They won't restore grave disabled. They just will not let go of their philosophy. They won't let go of it.
And do you think that's pressure from?
I think
or just ignorance.
I think it's an ideology. I think there's a lot of. If you buy into the post-structuralist bullshit, what a lot of people do, there is no objective reality.
Yeah.
So why should I listen to you as opposed to anybody else and just have my feelings and this feels better to me? That's post-structuralism. And we've been under the sway of it for a long time. And the French laugh at it. They're French philosophers that the French don't believe have been of any use for the last, they're 75 years ago. And the French are like, why are you people preoccupied with this stuff? They haven't had any relevance to the French in 75 years. They think it's hysterical.
And we're just leaning fully into it.
And we're just completely under the sway of it. I think academia got way into it. And that's where it sort of infected everybody. Now,
do you think that in creating these kind of systems, do you think there could be enough, I guess, earnest management to where you could keep corruption out of it? Because I just see it all as like a corrupt system.
Yeah, it's a great question. I've really not thought about that. I think when I think about doing it, I think about people that I know that know how to do it, know how to build residential systems and things. And they're substantial people. Who knows? Yeah. I hope not. Yeah. I would have to have a lot of oversight. And again, if you keep it sort of in the clinical realm and not in the political realm, it usually goes okay, but not necessarily.
Yeah. I mean, they seem to be, well, as we've seen over the last 3 years, clinical and political have kind of now married.
Oh my God.
It's funny,
where are you going, Jack?
Well, no, I'm just saying. No, I'm just.
I agree with you. I agree.
No, but like just from like being a youngish guy in recovery, like it's the kind of it's the stepchild in the corner that no one wants to talk about.
You see it, right? You can see stuff that. Well, should we do it?
Yeah.
All right, let's go. Go ahead.
COVID fucked up a lot of.
Fucked me up. Fucked my family up. I don't see why risk reward wasn't taken into account every freaking step of the way. It was we are in a mental health meltdown now because of it. It was predictable. I've said it from the beginning. Yeah. I particularly said you're going to destroy 8 to 15-year-olds. Can you imagine? You're socially isolated. You have to shelter in place. The mayor of California, of Los Angeles, every night got on the TV and said, shelter in place. You're 12 and you're hearing, that means a nuclear weapon is headed your way. Yeah. And if you step out, you're going to kill your parents or your grandparents. That is disgusting. That was the most horrific rhetoric of all time.
It was horrible.
And it predictably would hurt, especially adolescents.
Yeah, at the time, my daughter was 9, having anxiety attacks every night. Like,
of course.
My friend who teaches breathwork classes, I was having to have him get on Zoom at night to kind of calm her down.
Unconscionable.
Yeah.
I hope they grow up pissed.
Yeah.
I hope she is furious that they did this to her.
I think as she's kind of, she's 11 now and she's kind of realizing wow, that was pointless. I mean, she even sees it.
Oh, good for her. They could be our salvation.
Right.
That could be, I really do think that could be the age group that gets on with her from it.
Now, as a doctor though, did you experience any of the pressure that, other doctors were saying oh, I can't say this, I can't say that?
100%. I got smushed a couple times for daring to speak up about a couple things. Still, I have to do it very cautiously.
Yeah.
That's why I said you're scaring me. It's so clear now. It's so clear. It's so obvious.
Funny though, because now you've got Fauci and the head of the NIH coming out being yeah, we had it wrong, and it's so funny to me because it's the same playbook from Bush in Iraq. Oops, got it wrong.
It is the same playbook. Isn't
no one gives a shit. No one gives a fuck. I'm why are we not burning down buildings over this?
I think if you look at Twitter, there's a lot of persistent fury going on there.
It's true.
Where people are you want us just to forget about it? We can't. You hurt us. You damaged us. And by the way, the really horrible part is that they consciously went after people who tried to kind of calm it down. I was one of those people. And somebody put together a video of me. It makes it look like I was saying it's no different than the flu. I was not saying that. I was just saying just calm down.
Yeah.
We've been through other pandemics. With AIDS, I was there on the ground listening to Fauci, by the way. He's the reason I got involved with radio.
Wow.
He was a very significant figure in my life. And I really admired him. And I kept saying at the beginning of the pandemic, just listen to Fauci, listen to the CDC. They went sideways. I didn't know that was going to happen, but I did say that at the beginning. And I just thought the press and it turns out that also the CDC was using a conscious strategy of fear mongering. They hired people to help get people submit to their whims.
Yeah.
Do you know where 6 feet? You know where social distancing was a made up term for this pandemic?
Yeah.
Do you know where 6 feet came from?
Nope.
They were in a room one afternoon trying to decide whether they should recommend 3 feet or 60 feet. And they just went, well, we can get them to do 6 feet. Let's just do 6 feet.
It's insane.
No evidence, no nothing. And I still go into doctors' offices where their placards saying 6 feet saves lives. There is zero evidence of that. Zero. This is a highly aerosolized microscopic organism that goes 60 feet. That's how it goes, certainly 20 feet. And if you have a little wrinkle in your mask is now useless.
Yeah.
It's not spit. It's not what your surgeon is trying to prevent from going into the surgical field, which is bacteria, spit, hair, skin material. That will infect a surgical field. If he or she also has a virus, that will infect everybody in the room.
Yeah.
By the way.
And you know, because I got COVID. I got it from an airplane. I had 2 N95s on. Like I was because my fiance was pregnant, and I was like, boy. Okay, can't get it. She got it.
Oh man!
And then I was out of town, and I got it when I flew back to her.
Oof.
But the thing that I found interesting when she got it, I think she got it from food. Like, and I started doing some research, and I'm like, and I haven't heard many people talk about it.
It shouldn't happen, but who knows? I mean,
but that's the thing. Yeah. Like, I actually think it may have been spreading on food, and you never hear anything about that.
It would have to somehow have landed and then re-aerosolized in some weird way because it gets in through your nose.
Yeah,
and so. I'm like I'm open to your ghosts. I'm open to this too. Because you got it. Listen, one thing I have learned during COVID is to not be hubristic about anything.
Yeah.
Humility is a virtue, everybody. And as soon as you see somebody who's certain about something, take it with a grain of salt, whatever it is.
Well, the best thing I ever heard someone say is like, it's a novel coronavirus. We don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
And so the moment that they were coming out being like, no, this is it, this is that. And I'm like, well, how do you know? Mm-hmm. How do you know? Like we've had this, you know, when they were coming out with all this stuff, weeks it had been around.
Yes.
Although I think it was around a lot longer.
Maybe. But there's so much. And then you're not allowed to talk about a lab leak. You're not allowed to talk about that. You're not allowed to talk about keeping elderly people who are at highest risk safe. You're not allowed to talk about the fact that young people are mostly not at risk for serious illness. You just weren't allowed.
Oh, yeah.
And if you dared to, you were really seriously harmed.
Yeah.
And that's the harming your peers and stuff is the part I have a problem with. Also, one of the people don't remember the darkest chapter for me was patients being told by physicians, just go home and come back when your PO2 is 80. Like, we're not going to do anything for you. Go home until you're dying. And that's like, the Annals of Internal Medicine now is finally starting to publish research about early treatment. They put an article last week about budesonide and fluvoxamine together. Mm-hmm. Turns out, guess what? You can really make a difference early with that early treatment. Steroids were always useful, but doctors were using it regularly. The ones that dared to treat patients early, dared not just wait until they needed a ventilator. And then, of course, the ventilator itself was
killing people.
Put the death knell on everybody.
Yeah, the thing that I found disturbing. A friend of mine was a nurse, and she was explaining to me what the treatment plan was and how they were the ventilator with all the blood pressure medication and that's what was causing people's limbs to fall off.
Sure.
And you're like, I thought it was the virus that was like eroding your limbs.
No, it's a constriction of the peripheral vessels.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was like, never heard that being talked about on the news. They would just, fear. Oh, look, the virus makes your feet hang.
No beds. Yeah. No, there were no nurses. That's what the problem was.
Oh, really?
And when they said no beds, they usually meant no county beds.
Yeah.
Private hospitals have plenty of beds.
Oh, yeah. Well, I definitely knew that in LA. It's weird. Like fear, it's amazing the driving force fear is. For both good and bad, it's like you can scare someone into getting sober. You can be like, hey, your life's going to go to hell. Or you can scare someone into a place of like absolute just downward spiral forever.
This is an interesting topic. I'm not quite sure how I really feel about it. Right now, I feel like fear only makes things worse.
Yeah.
But you're right. Fear is a very powerful motivator. And it has utility. It's not without utility. It's panic is what the problem is.
Yeah.
Panic is no bueno, ever. I've never seen panic make anything better.
No.
And we had systematic induction of panic in this thing, and that's where I was upset.
Yeah, it's really
But fear is a motivator. So fear, like you said, fear like that's sort of. I'm not sure. Think addicts feel fear when they lose enough things, or they just sort of feel enough pain that they're done, or they get through the denial or something.
For me, I think it was more, just from my own experience. I think I was scared to not amount to anything. I think at its core, like I was like, oh, like this is not.
This is gonna ruin me.
Yeah, like there's no like a pot of gold at the end of this rainbow.
Yes.
It's just destruction and suffering at the end of the day.
So I would still say that that's not fear. Excuse me, I'm going to adjust this thing again. That's not suddenly you're afraid. I think it's your denial is broken through. I think that's what that is. Yeah, because that's real.
Yeah,
and addicts distort everything, right? Because your brain uses everything good to get you to keep using.
Yeah,
and everything bad. They'll use every part of who you are to kind of keep you going. And people don't appreciate that thinking, that stinking thinking, is the problem a lot of the time.
Have you ever read the book Tribe?
No, but I think I should.
Oh, it's amazing book.
Okay.
It's Sebastian Junger wrote it, and it's about how he dealt with PTSD, being a war correspondent, and the things that he found. And he did all this kind of research into different cultures throughout the world and how they process trauma and PTSD. And he kind of came to the conclusion that tribal structures thrive the best when it comes to any mental health crisis. And he cites all this research going back to Native Americans and
wait. Tribe serves the best utility, or they function the best?
Both.
Wow. This maybe times are going to get really good for us soon.
Well,
a lot of tribalism going on.
It's very true. But the funny, like when I was reading it, I'm like, wow, that's 12-step recovery.
Of course,
because
it's always you'll find it in everything that's useful.
Yeah,
I mean that's how it was an empiric model.
Yeah.
These various groups just got together and go, hey, this is working, let's put it all together, make one. Worked.
Totally.
Yeah.
And in most tribal structures, and if you think about it, it's been 200-300 years that as a society we've kind of moved away from traditional kind of village structure, tribal structure. And he was saying, he kind of puts forth in this book, like we're hardwired for it. We just don't realize it.
Yes.
And that's why people are so aligned with like football teams. It's like, that's my tribe. Like I want to see them go to combat this Sunday.
Right.
And in recovery, there's a rite of passage like most tribal structures.
Yep.
There's, you have to kind of earn your keep.
There are elders.
There are people you have to, everyone
There's
contributes.
Shamans are sort of like people that know the truth and stuff.
Yeah.
Oh no, it's good. I'm going to read that book because I feel like that tribalism is being manipulated right now in bad ways.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like to me.
Big time.
And in this whole business you tilted out a few minutes ago about being a victim, it's not good.
No,
it's not good for people.
No, like I saw a YouTube video came up the other day, and someone was talking about like, my trauma, and you're like, okay, sure, like we've all got trauma, but I'm not basing my whole existence on my trauma. And I'm sorry for people out there that feel like that's how they have to kind of process the planet and get through their day.
You'll end up recreating the trauma.
Yeah.
Humans do reenactments when they're in it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If all you ever talk about is the most traumatic things that have happened in your life, that's all you're going to think about.
You're going to think about it. You're going to attract people and places and be attracted to things that end up re-traumatizing. That's how the brain works.
Yeah.
But think about the guy that I was working with, the baby falling through the buildings and stuff. I mean, there's no way he could access that stuff without somebody helping him access it. And it is about, people have to understand that they do need other people. They have to trust other people and trust, maybe not the tribes that we've got set up these days, these political tribes and things. But I would argue the tribe you need to trust is the people that actually care about you.
Yeah.
And that can be an important source of what we're talking about here.
Do you think that, with this kind of, do you think there's going to be a breakthrough when people realize like, oh, wait a minute, just living in this kind of soup of trauma, air quote.
God, I hope so.
Do you think the people are going to realize like, oh, this doesn't work?
I don't know. Or is it just going to be a generational thing?
Yeah.
A new generation, your kids come in, your 9-year-old helps us out. I think my experience has been that people generally move towards health unless you're giving them too much for being unhealthy.
Yeah.
If there's too much secondary gain. If there's too much secondary gain, then they'll stay unhealthy.
Like, now you obviously have been working in, whatever we know, like recovery for so long, and you've been through so many generations of it. Can you clearly, are you seeing the differences in this kind of younger generation now as they're going into, like is the entitlement coming through worse than millennials and Gen X's?
You remember Bob Forrest, the guy with the head of that? So Bob and I for last like 4 years have been like, geez, how do we reach these kids? They are not interested in recovery. They can't follow direction. I mean, we've been sort of toying with the idea that you have to do something on the phone so they can look at their phone and get direction.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because they just will not listen to anything. And here's one of the things that I hope people receive this in the way it's intended. He one day had some young girl in there, a 19-year-old, multiple treatments, heroin addict, telling him what she thought of recovery and his approach to treatment and what he should be doing. And he goes, Jesus Christ, you're a 19-year-old heroin addict. I don't care. You need to shut up and follow it. I don't care what you think about what we're doing. You have no business speaking about it. I mean, you're entitled to your opinions, but you are not going to tell us how to run a treatment center.
Yeah.
And didn't go that great.
Wow.
Yeah, they don't receive it well when you come after them to try to get them. In the old days, right, we'd always just say, take the cotton out of your ears, put it in your mouth, right?
Yep.
And people go, okay, yeah. You can't always do that now.
It's so strange how things can shift so much generationally, and like you're saying, the flip-flop, and I was reading something and it was talking about how my kids' generation, there's a theory that they're going to end up being the most conservative generation because of rebellion.
I remember I was a young adolescent child when the whole hippie thing came around, and I found it overwhelming and confusing. It sort of scared me. And so then by the time I hit the 80s, remember, there was a big conservative shift by then. And so we were the young adults at that point. And so maybe something like that will happen.
It's just rebellion. Kids want to rebel what's the norm.
Listen, I saw somebody in London or somewhere doing an interview. I think it was somebody from Rage Against the Machine. And they said, well, you're a rebellious guy. What are you doing these days? He goes, I'm becoming a religious fundamentalist and I'm voting conservative. I was like, wow. I wouldn't swear I was a Rage musician, but I thought that's what I heard. So,
well, I mean, Rage Against the Machine, where they were like, don't come in here unless you're vaccinated. I was like, wow, you guys are really fighting the evil empire.
Well, that's the interesting thing. The people that claim to be speaking truth to power, they just wanted to be the elite, I think. They were trying to speak to the elite, and once they were the elite, they'll have none of it. Well, no feedback.
I just looked at it and I went, follow the money.
Like, follow the money is a very, I want to say, both interesting and accurate. Yeah, it's hard if you think that way, not cynically that way, but just matter of factly.
It is it's been a weird 3 years to kind of sit back on a spiritual front, on a recovery front, on a social front.
Oh my God. And when they closed down meetings, I thought, this is going to kill people too. Yeah. I was surprised how effective Zoom was. And Zoom has added a new dimension to getting people.
100%.
So people that are resisting, you just go, turn your camera off, go to a Zoom meeting. So it's a new way of accessing the sober community, but it's no way to stay sober. Yeah. You got to be in person. You got to be in flesh.
It's funny. I was at a meeting recently and this guy came up and he's like, oh, this is actually, he'd been sober 3 years. And he was like, this is actually my second in-person meeting. Wow. And I was like, real? I was like, you haven't got? He's like, no, because my kids and my mom, and like he had the kind of, the bubble going on. Yeah, yeah. And I was like, do you like it? He's like, yeah, it's so much better. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, it's essential. Bodies in space.
Yeah. There's something about it. There's something about
about it. That's what we've been talking. That's the ineffable. I don't know what it is. Our bodies communicate in some way we haven't yet figured out. Yeah. It happens.
Yeah. No, I have one of my therapists. She's a big fan. She's like, she talks about the dopamine release. Mm-hmm. When you're face to face with someone and you're able to have that connection, it's like, yeah, that's powerful stuff. And I think it goes back to tribalism.
It's the biology is kind of worked out. Yeah. But it's, right brain to right brain communication. The vagus nerve figures very prominently into it. And of course, the vagus is taking all kinds of information out of the body, and our facial musculature, even the muscles in our ears and our vocal cords are all tied into this mechanism that this guy named Dr. Porges calls the socio-emotional exchange system.
Interesting.
And it's based in the body. It's embedded in the body. And we've left the body out of we've talked about the brain for the last 30 years, and we left the body out, which is.
Well, didn't they just recently realize there's brain cells in your stomach?
It's more complicated than the answer is yes. There's neural tissue everywhere. We don't know what it's doing. It's not. This is going to sound weird, but it's not as simple as brain cells. Yeah. But it's tissue that is giving us information that we then can put in the world. And it's where do feelings come from? They come from our body. Yeah. Emotions are what we express. Feelings are what's coming out of our body, and our brain is sort of trying to filter and understand and process. Yeah.
It's I have this conversation with my partner, and I'll be like, I don't think we're not truly our bodies. We're somewhere in this kind of space between the kind of the mental and the physical, because I'm like, tell me what your liver's doing right now.
Right.
Tell me what your kidneys are doing.
That's right.
Like if I was truly in control of my body, I could be like, oh, I can tell you exactly what everything is doing. Like I can if I'm holding something in my hands. And there's
something interesting in that observation.
Yeah.
Because we don't know it, but we are feeling it.
Yeah.
That's the weird part.
Because it's a constant hum. It's
a thing. It's a something. And what the something is, we have no conscious awareness of.
Yeah. So. Where are you at with some of the alternative kind of plant medicines coming out, for recovery? Like, do you think that there is a genuine place for it?
I do. I think it'll be, I don't know what it is, though, and I don't know at what risk.
Yeah.
Patients of mine have been going down and doing ibogaine forever. I've seen one case get better with that. The other ones, all of them got better for 6 months and then went back. They routinely had significant personality changes, which scares the shit out of me, because you're changing who the person is with a chemical. It's almost back like we were talking about with the death and dying stuff. I was like, that's a profound thing. And so I'm not comfortable with it yet. I do think the mushrooms, the psilocybins and all these, I think, for instance, end-of-life dread, it's very clear that LSD has great utility. If you have like 6 months to live or 4 months to live, who cares what the consequences are? If you feel better, great.
Yeah.
But psilocybin for depression, well, if it's recalcitrant depression and you're going to try to kill yourself multiple times, is it worth the risk? Yeah, probably. But we don't really understand what we're doing yet.
Yeah.
We will one day.
Now, have you seen I think it's Texas. Isn't Texas actually running clinical trials with
mushrooms?
Are they doing mushrooms?
That's what I think, or psilocybin at least. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot. They're going to figure some stuff out. It's not zero, I promise.
Yeah.
It may be profound. I just don't know yet. I just don't know at what risk. That's the part that scares me.
Well, I guess that's constantly with any kind of
anti-medicine.
Yeah, anything new on the horizon. Do you think in our lifespan they will cure this? Do you think it's curable?
This being
addiction, mental health crisis?
No.
No? You just think it's everyone's wired differently?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's genetics for sure. But I say no because it's so it's so complicated. It absorbs so much of who you are and how your brain and central nervous system and peripheral autonomic nervous system works, that to think that you can press a button or give a pill or just give a singular sort of intervention and it's going to cure this thing that's affecting so many parts of your body and that need to heal.
Yeah.
Even if I fantasize that they may be able to take a lot of the drive away, right? And so your distorted thinking may get better early. I can believe that there will be things that will take the drive away without gratifying the illness. I mean, Suboxone is still on the edge with all that, right? But you'll still have to heal.
Yeah.
And the healing requires spiritual, emotional, interpersonal, all these things have to go on for you to come all the way back.
Yeah. It's, it really is that kind of, because myself, like I have these moments where I'm just like, fuck, have I got to do this for the rest of my life?
Well, what is this for you now?
I go to meetings. Okay, I try and get to one a week.
You know what that means to me? I speak fluent Attic. So,
sure, yeah, let's hear it.
So I think you would find less of that kind of feeling if you got more involved with service. Did you sponsor other people?
I have. I just haven't in a long time.
I think that may be the missing piece.
Interesting.
Because people, service has, you just start feeling so grateful.
Sure.
You feel so much gratitude when you can help another person with this stuff.
And 100%, like you're saying that, and I'm like, oh yeah, I guess you.
Yeah, and you don't have to go to meetings as much, but you may have to spend a little time working with these folks. You know what I mean? So, and the meetings then become a way of staying sober while those guys challenge you. Yeah, because they're challenging, as you know.
Well, it's definitely a
triggering.
Yeah.
Oh hell yeah. Yeah. That's when I hire, I hired a lot of recovering people, Bob Forrest, recovering guy. I made them all go to Al-Anon. They had to go to Al-Anon. Too triggering. Yeah. You can be a sponsor. You don't have to go to Al-Anon, but in terms of working in a unit where you're inundated by the disease all the time in its acute states, got to go to Al-Anon.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think probably for me, some of the most profound stuff I've actually heard in recovery is when I went to other 12-step groups. When you start all of a sudden kind of pulling back a little bit and you're like, oh, this isn't just alcoholism or drug addiction. Yeah. There's other things going on here. Yeah. And it's, well, I think most addicts, we're all double hitter, triple hitters. It's not
pretty much all double hitters for sure.
Yeah.
Which means codependent as well as drug addicts, what we're talking about. Yeah. And how could it not be? How could it be otherwise? Because the gene came from somewhere and you lived with that person. Yeah. And so there's the codependency.
Oh my, I have the craziest story to tell you. This just popped into my head. So like 9 years ago, I went to a meeting on the East Side and I'd never gone there before, whatever. And I'm sat there and it was a 12 and 12 meeting. So they were going over the 12 steps, 12 traditions. Yeah. And it was all about anonymity. That was the topic of conversation. And it was towards the kind of midway through the meeting, and this guy, raised his hand, he starts sharing. He's like, I can't stand all these celebrities that get sober and then they start going, talking on their like high horse about this and that. And he's like, I used to listen to Loveline all the time. And he goes, and this one time he's like, that fucking Jack Osbourne.
And you're in the room?
I'm in the room. He has no idea. And he goes off on this whole thing. And I've always been one to very much respect the traditions. Yeah. I never will overtly say what 12-step group I am in or participate in. And because I go to many, I've been to many different kinds. Good. And he just goes on. Literally his entire share is about how much he fucking hates me and I'm the reason that stopped him from coming back. Like, yeah, he went dark with it. And I was like, shit. And I'm like fuming at this point because I'm like, well, number one, none of that what you're saying is true. Of course. And, and two,
you know what addicts do with resentment.
100%. That the resentment in his head became the monster doing press ups.
Yeah. Did you go introduce yourself?
Well, what happened was my buddy, it was like a ticket meeting. So they handed out raffle numbers and whatever number they called. And my buddy's number get called. He was sat next to me and just hands me his ticket. And he's like, do your thing. And I got up and I was like, hi, my name's Jack Osbourne. And I'm and I said my thing. I identified. And the dude just was like, and it was, it would
be good for him.
Yeah.
It'd be good for him.
Totally. And I just kind of said, I was like, hey man, like, I don't know what you think I said. Don't know what you think I didn't say, but I can tell you, I vehemently respect this tradition and I always have. And I'm, and I kind of said my piece and I just left it with, hey dude, I'll keep coming back and I'll pray for you.
Brilliant.
And he, the weirdest thing was though, the meeting rallied the fuck around him. No one came up to me afterwards being like, oh dude, I'm sorry you had that experience. It was the strangest thing. They all just,
how long ago? 9 years ago?
9 years ago. Yeah. They like rushed around this guy and they were like, dude, are you okay? And blah, blah. And I'm just like, wow, like fuck this meeting.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it was really, one guy came up to me and was like,
and it was not a codependency meeting? It was
no. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Because codependents will do stuff like that.
Oh, fully.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Well, well, fuck them.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like that was not good for that guy.
No,
that's not good for him. He needs to. He should have. I would hope he'd come up to you afterwards. Just go. Yeah, that's all mine.
I think as I was walking away, he was like, "Oh, hey man, like no hard feelings." He kind of did one of those.
Close.
Yeah, I was like, "All right, whatever." Is what it is.
So interesting.
Yeah, it's
So the 11th tradition, which is what we're talking about. Bob and I did a deep dive into that before we decided to do Celebrity Rehab because we were worried about that. Mm-hmm. And it was actually Bob Bill W.'s wife that insisted on that.
Interesting.
And towards the end of her life, she lived quite a bit longer than he did. She started thinking it was a bad idea because the miracle of recovery needed, not that people need to proselytize, but people need to be aware. They need to have some way of raising awareness about it. Obviously, she's worried about commercialism and all the kinds of things that could happen to it. And I totally agree with the tradition. Our way of dealing with it was we didn't talk about 12 steps at all during the whole treatment process. Of course, what was the biggest criticisms we got? Where's the 12-step process?
Yeah.
So of course we were doing 12-step. We just left it out of the show.
Yeah.
But it is an interesting conundrum because people do need to know about it. I think people are aware now. I think that's improving. It's really just that zone of how an individual talks about his or her recovery is something that has to be navigated very, very carefully.
Yeah. How was the experience of doing celebrity rehab from a?
It was intense. It was intense. It did what we wanted it to do. It was actually. Somebody came to me to do it, and I was like, oh, come on. And then pitched it, and then VH1 showed interest. I'm like, oh, man, I went into hiding. I just like, oh, I can't do this. And Bob Forrest came in my office one day, and we have a chair, the patient, you weren't on our unit, you were on a different unit. There's a chair where the patient sits, and he comes in, he sits down, he goes, God, I am so tired of us treating patients that have public profiles, and they're being vilified on TV as though they're on a vacation or they're making excuses. They're sick and they work hard for their recovery. He goes, we need to do a TV show where we show that. And I was like, funny you would say that. Somebody has approached me, and he slammed his hands on his knees, goes, yes, we're going to do it. And he stormed out of my office. And then we did it. And it was very intense. It had better outcome than I anticipated. So the first season, I was scared, really scared. Every day I was like, are you okay? Are you okay? Is the camera's bothering you? Blah, blah, blah. And so about a week in, I was, at the group, I'm like, everybody okay? Everybody okay? This is the camera troubling you? Is this a problem? Do you okay here? And I was kind of going around the room, and Mary Carey, the porn star, said to me, she goes, Drew, I've done just about everything in front of a camera. I know what this is in front of a camera. I thought, this thing fell down.
Shit. Sorry.
It's a new mic. It's a new system.
It's what happens when we build a place in a weekend.
I'll hold it for now. No, it's all good. And I've been struggling with it all day. You guys have seen me dealing with it. Here we go. So I got less afraid at that point. And everybody in every season went through the same sort of arc, which was they came in resistant, wanted to get paid, wanted to be on TV, and wanted to make a mockery of everything we were doing. We took our treatment very seriously, and they all went from that to, oh my goodness, I'm getting something out of this, to, oh, I want other people to be aware of this and understand how this works. So I want to be a good result, so I can be an example to other people. That pretty much everybody experienced it. That was a blessing. I did not know that was going to happen. Yeah. Now, not everybody did great. I mean, it's it's drug addiction. They did what they did, and the ones that passed away primarily were killed by my peers, who were giving them opiates because they came in and said they had a headache, and I used to beg them not to go to doctors. Because then it was really treacherous to see a doctor.
Yeah, doctors can be amazing and dangerous at the same time.
Back then, man, it was 90s, early 2000s. I think people understand now the overprescribing of opiates. Yeah. It's catastrophe. It's another story I'll tell you sometime about how that happened. I lived through that too. I was complaining about that the whole time also. I was told I was crushed by the Joint Commission of Hospital Accreditation, the Department of Mental Health, state medical societies. I was a dinosaur who was interested in human suffering and should be marginalized, and certainly shouldn't be seeing patients for speaking up about the overprescribing of opiates.
That's insane.
It was insane. It was insane.
Wow.
Yeah.
These governing bodies, man, they serve a purpose, but yet they also get so clouded.
Especially when it comes to medicine, bureaucracy is kind of the enemy. I mean, the best unit is a patient and a physician, informed patient, motivated patient, caring physician, well trained. That's your best unit. You do anything to that, you're only going to fuck things up.
Well, I think that's an awesome note to end on.
Good. This has been so fun.
This has been great.
We're not done, my friend. I've got a ton more things I want to talk to you about. I want to see more of your ghostly things.
Do you want to go more ghost?
I want someday. I want to come back more of a ghost. I want to be like your dad. I want you to serve stuff up to me.
You know what? We'll do that.
And just go, I don't know.
We'll do our very own Want to Believe episode here.
All right. Good. I love it. I will do that. 100%.
All right.
That's a deal.
Well, Dr. Drew, thank you so much. All right. Well, this has been Ghosts and Grit with Jack Osborne and Dr. Drew.
Thank you.
You can find us on, wherever you get your podcasts. We're also on YouTube, so make sure you like and subscribe. Oh, and Drew, where can folks find you?
My wife produces a show called Ask Dr. Drew at 3 o'clock Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, where we're talking a lot of people that were silenced during COVID. I'm talking to all the doctors that were silenced, and I'm learning something from every one of them. Some of them, not I don't agree with everything, but these are serious professionals with extreme pedigrees that people crushed for not good reasons. So I immediately wanted to talk to them. So we're essentially doing that. We're talking to all of them. I do a podcast over at your mom's house. Check that out. Get it at Dutcher.com.
All right, cool.
After Dark. It's called After Dark.
And on you just moved over to Rumble, didn't you?
This streaming show we do at 3:00 on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We're just going everywhere.
Okay,
we just go everywhere. YouTube, Rumble, Twitch, Twitter, anywhere. So
awesome, cool. Well, yeah, folks, make sure you check it out.
Thanks for that.
All right, later, guys.
See you.